Hello and welcome to Rauta's Worst to Best ranking videos. This time it's one of those big four bands, Anthrax from United States of America. Now I just happen to be one of those dudes, walking dudes I guess, who grew up with thrash metal before moving on to death metal and black metal and all kind of various extreme metal styles, and quite a few of those old school thrash metal bands defined my music taste back in the days. Obviously Metallica was the biggest, but Anthrax and Slayer played big roles there. Nowadays, I would say Slayer is more to my liking than Metallica overall, but the point here is I'm a fan of all these different styles and bands. This time, however, I want to talk to you about Anthrax and make my worst to best video. Now, I know some people say it's kind of pointless when there is still an active band, but nonetheless, people keep asking me to do these videos even of active bands, that is, those that are prone to do more music in the foreseeable future, that is, not just only disbanded bands. And, well, Anthrax turned out 40 years last year, so I figured why not. Now, there is another incentive in regards of doing this video this year, this summer, and those two reasons are, first of all, I got to review their 40th anniversary book, the comic book known as Among the Living, just recently. I will link it to this video later on. And that kind of got me thinking I should really once again listen to the whole Anthrax discography and figure out which way I would rank them. The other reason is rather obvious. Anthrax is playing in my home city in a couple of months. So this fall 2022. So I decided okay, let's go to Anthrax. I mean, it's just so good mood, groovy, thrash metal music that why the hell not I would not talk about it. After all, it's kind of a perfect gym music if you ask me, with its kind of happy moody stuff, and because of the grooviness, not too fast, not too slow, but also having a lot of energy going on. And besides, most Anthrax albums are just killer good, but not all of them, and that's my point with this video. I'm gonna rank them according to my personal taste and explain on the way through from the beginning to the end what is going on, which things have changed. I try not to make this way too long, so I've tried to make it as compact as possible, but given with 40 years of music in the making, it's kind of hard to, just make it compact. Now, since we're always focusing on full albums on these worst to best videos, I'm just gonna talk about them and guide you through two of them and skip all the singles and compilations and whatnot, because it would otherwise take hours and hours of talking. Let's get started. Now, Fistful of Metal came to be in 1984. So that is roughly 3 years after the band has been founded. There was a couple of demos before that, like pretty much all the bands in the world did exactly that. And Fistful of Metal featured actually some other vocalists than Anthrax is known for. Usually Anthrax can be put into three different eras. There is this pre-John Bush era, that is the first Belladonna era, and then there is post-Bush era, which is Belladonna's comeback. But before Belladonna and Bush, there was this other vocalist who was part of the deal here, Neil Turbin, and he did just a good job with this rather heavy metal kind of album known as Fistful of Metal, the debut album. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm gonna admit that this summer was the first time I actually gave Fistful of Metal a listen. Why didn't I do it before if I liked the band so much? That is a question I really can't answer, other than that it was just my gut feeling. It was my gut feeling that I wouldn't actually like this album so much because, it's a little bit different. Yes, it's kind of a heavy metal more than just pure thrash metal. It actually reminds me a lot of Manowar early stuff with its given style. And by no means it's not a bad album. Actually, it has stood the test of time quite well. But it's also quite different. It's not like Pantera different, considering the debut album and how Pantera came to be. But in my opinion, there is a big gap between Fistful of Metal and Spreading the Disease, even though the change between those albums, I mean the timeline, it's only like 1 year. So a big bump from a different style. Then again, Metallica also had a kind of a style change, but in my opinion, Anthrax, in a way, has a bigger one. Now onwards, Spreading the Disease, which started Joey Belladonna era, 1985, 1987, 88 with State of Euphoria, and I'm only believing 1987, and Persistent of Time, 1990. Now, this started what is, in my opinion, known as Anthrax Golden Era. Golden Era in terms of that good mood, grinning, happy thrash metal, which kind of separates the band from the rest. That is, where Slayer always went at one darker and more satanic thing. Metallica went more epic lines and kind of a darker as well, and Megadeth did something else. Anthrax was always like the happy guy of these four bands. There's a reason why not everybody likes Anthrax. I met a lot of people who say, I can't stand Anthrax. Maybe it's just too joyful, too much playful, or whatever. Some people can't stand because these guys are happy-go-lucky kind of things. And I don't know, there's something really, really good stuff that kind of nailed the whole 1980s kind of Anthrax. But I like it, and I think that's defined it. Not just only for me, but a lot of people. Now, come Bush era with the Sound of White Noise, 1993. And then Stomp 442 and Volume 8. You know, things started to change. And in my opinion, for the worse. The thing here is, there are lots of good things in 1990s era Anthrax. I'll get back to that later on. But a lot of things also went for the worst. And I think, and I'm gonna explain it and reveal it now, I think the 90s era in general is the worst for Anthrax. Things, however, changed over the years. Bush got out of the band and Belladonna came back, and then came new albums. Obviously Belladonna's, voice has changed over the years. I mean, that's then kind of given when you get older and all that stuff. So the new albums kind of have a new wave of Belladonna. The sound is different. The voice is a little bit different than what it was back in the 80s. But in my opinion, it's better this way. Even though I can really, really appreciate and like his early stuff that when he was really high pitchy, kind of almost like power metal, heavy metal combination with his vocals, I like even more than what he has done in 2000s with his voice and all that stuff. And now, finally, For All Kings in 2016 is the last Anthrax album by this day. So more than 6 years it has been quite silent. If you just exclude these live albums and compilations, which are then again more and more about recycling. Now, don't mind me saying this, but I've reviewed a couple of live albums, live DVDs, mind you, of what Anthrax during the years. I think the first one was around 2003 or something like that. After We Come For You All. Yes, this was the music of Mass Destruction 2004. That was the first one I reviewed back in the days. And then a couple of other ones. But they do not match the albums, in my opinion, nor seeing the band live. I've seen Anthrax a few times and they always do a killer show. Doesn't matter what kind of set list they have. But anyway, a killer band, both on albums and both live. Though DVDs are, well, they are good at some ways, but they don't match the real live situation. So you get to see them, and I'm happy to see, I hope to be happy to see once again those guys live this fall. But now to the actual meat and potato of this video, my ranking, which one is the worst and why. I'll also try to drop you some names, that's why I have my phone here as like reminding me of which songs to mention. If I would go to the weakest albums of them all, they would be these two from mid-90s, or late 90s. Actually, this was kind of a hard cookie to crack for me, which one is the worst. But I would say Volume 8, The Threat Is Real. This time, it seems like Anthrax had totally dropped the ball. I mean, there's not a single killer track here to make this album kind of justified. To me, it more like sounds like a band that has, or it's trying to cover Anthrax songs and has nu metal elements, and it's like, why are you guys doing this? This doesn't sound like a real Anthrax album. It's really more a miss than any kind of a hit. It's not horrible, but it's pure mediocrity in so many ways. Of course, the band, once again, has a good production. I mean, they have been in the business by this almost 20 years. But as far as the songwriting goes, it's, for an Anthrax album anyway, it's horrible. And it's the worst album, in my opinion. The second worst, album by the band is obviously the one that I already mentioned, Storm 442. Now, Catharsis was the song I needed to mention of Volume 8. That would be the song to start with if you need to. Volume 442 is a little bit better, but much like Volume 8, it's really losing the ball. It's dropping the ball and saying like, I don't know why we're doing here, whatever we're doing. But at least it has a couple of better songs. My song would be Bear, because it's almost like an Anthrax ballad. And mind you, Anthrax does good ballads. This is maybe my opinion only, but I think so anyway. And it's not surprised, but even Metal Archives has released it based on 11 reviews, like 49 version. I wouldn't be as harsh, but it's closer to 6 than 7 out of 10, that is. So those would be the worst albums by the band. And then it gets complicated because pretty much all the albums are, in my opinion, worthwhile. But I would go as far as, back in the history, as Fistful of Metal, giving it 7 out of 10. This is the debut album, and the band is, like I said, more about kind of heavy metal than actual pure thrash metal. You feel free to challenge me on this opinion, but this is how I feel about it. And while it has kind of a good groovy and it's good for a debut album, it hardly has much to do with the later Anthrax albums, which are way more energetic and they're way harsher and more trashy in nature. But it has pretty solid track list overall. I mean, there are no weak points as such, and it's very listenable still to this day. Death from Above might be the song I would pick out of this one, but also Death Rider does its job. I mean, pretty energetic songs overall, and as such, you know, definitely worth more listening to than the poor ones. Then I guess I would go to the last album, For All Kings 2016. This is by no means a bad album, it's actually pretty good of an album. But it seems like more like leftovers from worship music, and We've Come For You All. The thing here is, it's overall what could be just described as modern Anthrax. It's very kind of melodic, it's not trashy, it seems like old guys are slowing down, they know what their weaknesses and strengths are, and as such they're not pushing the limit anymore. Not speed, not heaviness and all that, but more like, okay, let's add more dynamics, let's go for melodies and let's go for catchy part and all that stuff. They basically are on their way to the grave. No, sorry, retirement. But this is a good album in so many ways. It just isn't as good as the better ones. But this one has some really cool songs like Suzerain, or actually one of my favorite tracks, Breathing Lightning. Some say it doesn't really fit the Anthrax bill. It's like almost like too lightweight. But in my opinion, it's a really, really good track. And overall, it's a good album for sure, but not among the best, not even close to that. And now I'm gonna drop my surprise ball to this mix and say something that some people consider like their best or very close to it anyway. And that would be Persistence of Time in 1990. Now remember when I mentioned the 1990s being my least favorite Anthrax era? Well, this is one of the reasons why I guess that is. I mean, people love this album. I don't. I think it's a good album, but it's far from the best. The thing here is, for me, it doesn't really have those so-called Anthrax hit songs. Sure, it has Got the Time, but it's a cover song. It has Belly of the Beast, which is a really, really catchy song, as is Keeping It in the Family, and Time. But that's about it. The rest are just like, okay, they're solid songs, production, everything is right there. But to me, it feels it's more about the change that is about to come with the 90s rather than making good songs. It's almost like by this album, they lost their goofiness. One of their fortes in the 80s. And as such, I think it's somewhere in the middle when it comes to being one of the better Anthrax albums. So, good, definitely. Don't get me sued for that. But it's far from being the great. Now we've covered the first, we've covered the last, and some of the middle. And this is where I would enter the so-called classic era. And now you might be wondering, what the hell is wrong with this guy, because he's talking about that. Wait a second, one more album before we go into that. And that is Worship Music from 2011. Like I said, this is so much like the last album, For All Kings. Except that overall this is a lot better. Now, this is an album that has lot of good songs. Fight Him Till You Can, The Devil You Know, Crawl. Some of the really, really good songs. Now there's a couple of instrumental ones which could have been, dropped from the set list. But overall, I think this is a solid album. It's just some of those really good mood albums which are definitely lacking the trashiness but still have really, really good songwriting. And as such, I would put it here. And then the classic era, which I was talking about. Some don't necessarily consider this a trio so much as I do, but Spreading the Disease, Among the Living, and State of Euphoria, in my opinion, they're much like, Dark Throne's Unholy Trinity. Maybe in Anthrax era we could call them Holy Trinity. No, kidding aside. But these three albums, in my opinion, are the classic Anthrax. The stuff that defined the 80s and really, really good trilogy overall, if we can call it that. State of Euphoria is the weakest of these three, but I like it a lot. Be All End All, it's almost like a perfect, opening track. Out of Sight, Out of Mind, fucking great. It almost starts playing in my head when I'm, listening to this. Who Cares Wins, Schism, it's a great album. Misery Loves Company. It's kind of even hard to pick one of my favorite tracks, like one track, which it seems I forgot to do. I instead listed a lot of those. But Be All End Of would be the track I would say, yeah, go for it if you need something from State of Euphoria. The second one on this list, that is now we're going towards the top list, would be Among the Living. This is one of those really classic albums that shows some of the best parts of Anthrax, especially the 80s era. Among the Living, really great job. Caught in a Moss, I Am the Law. You get the idea. Skeleton in the Closet, Indians. One World might be not that much of a great song compared to the all, but this one has no weaks, no mediocrity at all. It's all the way good stuff. Not the greatest of Anthrax, but really, really good stuff. And as you can guess it, this classic era top, in my opinion, on the top is Spreading the Disease. Now, never liked the Lone Justice track. It feels like it's misplaced, but it has maybe my favorite track, or at least one of them, Medusa. That is the track here which I need you to go to. The other good ones are Gung Ho and Armed Dangerous, Aftershock, Madhouse, definitely. Hey, those GTA games. GTA, the 80s game, whatever it's called, can't really figure it. Vice City, yeah, thank you for my mind. Having Madhouse played where you're really driving the game and it's already taking you to the 80s. So these are some of the greatest Anthrax albums which I need to mention and talk about. Now you might wonder, what is wrong with this guy? Why he has not mentioned that one album that shouldn't be on the top, but it is indeed. Pretty much, we can scroll down, yeah, 80s, covered, 90s, covered, and then going to the 2000s. I didn't mention The Greater of Two Evils because it's just remakes of those songs, so you can pretty much forget it. Then we have 2010s with Worship Music and For All Kings. Which album we are forgetting? Yeah, they're rather obvious. We've Come For You All. Now, could this be really my favorite album? I kid you not, it's not. There's not one other album which I need to mention before that, and that is Sound of White Noise. Now, like I said, I really like John Bush vocals. The rest of the lineup, pretty much the classic stuff. But what matters with the... I just skipped back. What matters for me on Sound of White Noise, it's more diverse. So when I was all rattling out, all bitching about 90s, about Anthrax having its weakest period, there's this one exception, and it's called Sound of White Noise. Why so? Pottersfield, great opening track, only, even better. Room for One More, really nice. Package Rebellion, great track. High Pro Glow, or Invisible, I love it. 1,000 Points of Hate, fucking good. And then the best track on the album, Black Lodge. It's really dark. It reminds me of Twin Peaks, but it also reminds me of Death and Demise. Of some close one. Those lyrics are dark, the mood is dark. The rest of the album, pretty good. This is not an exit, a good track. But I could just live on Black Lodge and only. Really, this is in my opinion one of the better tracks, so I totally disagree with these reviews averaging 62%, because for me, this is closer a 9er. So yeah, it's one of my favorite Anthrax albums, as much as it might surprise you or make you disagree. But that album, Bush pretty much nailed it with his really nice vocals. His more raspy vocals is better for me than Belladonna, even though I think Belladonna is technically speaking better vocalist, but Bush is my man of choice. And then the best album, also by Bush, I kid you not, and that is this We've Come For You All. Now once again, 10 reviews saying 55% on average. Really? Because for me, when I was reviewing it early 2003, almost 20 years ago that is, I fucking loved it. I still fucking love it. Because it's great. It's great track list. What Doesn't Die, Superhero, Safe Home, yeah, Black Dahlia, Strap It On, Nobody Knows Anything. Cadillac Rockbox might not be that good of a track, but overall, this is a fucking great of an album. I don't know why it clicks so much with me. Maybe because I'm fucking old man and I like that good mood. I don't need that darkness all the time. When I need, I go for dark ambient or black metal. But when I need that kind of a good groovy, whether I'm driving my car, having a couple of beers, or hitting the gym, yeah, this kind of a good energetic mood is my choice to go. So my list for Anthrax worst to best might be very different from you, and I get it. A lot of you are Belladonna fans. A lot of you don't really care about Anthrax after the 80s. But for me, it's a little bit of mix and match. A little bit, well, quite a bit of that 80s stuff. Boom, putting in my pouch. Taking that one album from the 90s, 2, then this from 2000, early 2003 that is. And mix and match, and a little bit of flavors here and there. So overall, that kind of proves that Anthrax can be very diverse, very versatile band. Lots of variation with the songs, be it ballads, be it just, dumb songs like SOD, that is Stormtroopers of Death, or be it just, the kind of a darker songs like Black Lots. Lots of different things can match Anthrax territory and still be really good. And on top of that, you basically have 3 good vocalists, Turbin, Bush, Belladonna. And Belladonna even with kind of 2 different eras. So definitely, there's so much things. There's so many things to love Anthrax for. And I fucking love it because it's a good band. Like I said, both on live, both on albums. Great gear things. Scott Ian being one of my favorite rhythm guitar dudes. He has the kind of a touch that it's not easy to just, match his thing. Well, hello to what James Hetfield and all. There are plenty of those, but still, Scott Ian is the man. And of course, the rest of the crew can't really, just overlook their part in making the music. So yeah, Anthrax is a fucking great band, and I hope to interview them. If not this year, maybe some other time, foreseeable future. And of course, I hope they will be making more music. It's a great band, great 40 years, and then some on the road and doing albums and all that stuff. So, fucking great band. I hope I got this idea you to check out at least some of the songs, some of the albums I mentioned here on this over-length video. All my love to Anthrax. Great. Keep trashing and be the walking dude. Or not. Anyway, see you soon with more reviews and other videos coming your way.